Very good evening to everybody. Webtel, as you are all aware, is a software company which is in various compliances. We are pioneers of TDS and XBRL softwares in the country, and also various other solutions. Uh, and we have a team of professionals led by CAs, CS, and various legal and software professionals. Next slide. We have also partnered with the government for various initiatives, and we have a bouquet of products like Virtual Office, which are websites for CA firms, which a new offering, which is a mini ERP for CA firms. Also, various TDS, income tax softwares, or a combination thereof, which is Goldmine, and WebEsign, which is for digital signing of documents, etc. So we have a bouquet of products, and our latest addition to that is a work at home solution, which we proudly call as WA. And in this pandemic situation, I think we all have faced problems in working properly, and because offices are not fully functional. And let us see this. Social distancing is a new norm in the unprecedented situation. Stay home, stay safe. While safety is a big concern, how long can we wait for the situation to become normal? How to keep working while taking necessary precautions is a challenge for everybody. We need a utility to let us work at home. What is WA or work at home? WA is Webtel's new utility which allows access from anywhere to Webtel, Talibusy, etc. other servers to virtual server in data center in India, available 24/7, and it also has an option to static IP in on-premise server. Now the question would be how WA works. Let us see. Get server access through WA. Softwares like Tally, Busy, Webtel, etc. installed on the server only. Only WA installed on employee PC. No need for other softwares. Employees can get anytime, anywhere access to softwares on server, and access to user as per need to use basis. WA work at home solution for everybody to help you work. And this is how you will work. There will be a central server either on your premises or on the cloud, and each one of you can access the system server through your own homes, and it will be as if you are working on a LAN environment. Such good speed with necessary hardware solutions and the Webtel solution. A small step by Webtel for safety and security of your clients and the staff. Now this QR code is there, which you can scan on your mobile phones if you want to know more about WA utility. And already many of our CA friends and advocate friends, other professionals have already started working from home, and on a very limited basis they go to offices and they are able to work at home using WA utility. So you can use your mobile phones scanners to scan this QR code and know more about this WA utility. Over.
Thank you.
The next speaker of the day, ladies and gentlemen, is Advocate Kapil Sharma, a partner at Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan Attorneys. He's involved in transaction advisory practice of the firm. He has more than 12 years of experience in indirect tax advisory. He has advised clients on a wide range of indirect tax matters, including matters pertaining to goods and services tax in India. He specializes in structuring business operations, devising supply chains, identifying and advising on tax efficient business models, reviewing tax compliances, cross border structuring, as well as structuring of business transfers, joint ventures, and foreign investments. He's also an active member of various trade associations. And at the advocacy level, he has been constantly helping various industries in the capacity building for the implementation of GST in the country. He's been an active speaker at various national and international seminars, workshops, and conferences organized on indirect taxation. I would request everybody to listen to Kapil Kumar Sharma ji, we welcome him.
you, Rajiv ji, for the kind introduction. And I would like to take the opportunity of thanking the platform and the effort made by both WebTel and CGPI for collating so much of people for sharing of the knowledge, which is a wealth actually to be shared. And wishing on this very special day to all the professional colleagues of mine a very successful tenure ahead. And as Vimalji also pointed, we have to resolve that in this struggling time, we need to pass on the best that we can in terms of knowledge and enhance whatever possible aspects that we need to brush up in terms of knowledge. As a feedback, as a sincere feedback, my only suggestion was that while choosing topic, we could have done a touch better as far as allocating a multiple topic in span of 25 minutes. But then let us try and do justice with what we have. Maybe for next time we'll be more cautious in terms of selecting the topic, because topics like anti-profiteering itself is a basic collation of so much of data, so much of controversy revolving around it. I think we need complete half an hour to 45 minutes to do justice to anti-profiteering. But without wasting much of time, let us go ahead and try and see what best we can consider in the following 25-30 minutes to take forward. Speaking about anti-profiteering per se, I think this term has one of the most debated terms ever since the GST has been introduced for past 3 years. The reason why this has been debated is this was introduced with...
Professor, sorry to interrupt. Yes. Your voice is not audible. It is echoing. Could you please be little closer to your mic?
I am using headphones, should not be a problem. But just give me a moment. I'll just change the setting. Just give me a moment.
Because the voice is not very clear.
Are you able to hear me properly?
Yeah, it is better, I think now.
Sir, okay. Can you be clearer, closer to the mic of the...
Okay. I'll do that.
Now it is much better,
Okay, so I'll just raise the tone also so that I can be more audible. Coming back to topic again without wasting time. The anti-profiteering as a measure was introduced as an anti-inflammatory measure, keeping in the mind the inflation, which may be on the account of change in tax regime. Earlier, we were struggling with multiple taxes, such as GST, such as sales tax, service tax, excise, and so on and so forth, entry tax, luxury tax, entertainment tax. There was a plethora of taxes which were clubbed into GST when this was introduced. The intent of the government of introducing this section 171 was to ensure that the benefit on account of tax efficiency is passed on to the buyer. The event such as the conversion of taxes on account of CST, entry tax and other were required to be merged. So if you see the definition of anti-profiteering, it actually triggers on two events. One is reduction in rate of tax and other is benefit of input tax credit. When we talk of reduction in rate of tax, the point that immediately comes into mind is reduction in overall effective tax rate. When we say overall effective tax rate, we means excise plus VAT plus other tax which may be applicable in pre-GST compared with GST regime, and in case of a services, service tax and other taxes coupled with service tax and compared with GST. If the rate of tax of GST is lesser than the earlier taxes, then there is a reduction in rate of tax. The benefit on account of reduction in rate of tax has to be passed on by way of commensurate reduction in price of the goods to the buyer. Similarly, what also emerges is reduction in rate of tax in GST. As we have seen almost 36 months of GST, there has been shuffling of tax rate and goods amongst various slabs to the other slab. A primary example could be fast-moving consumer goods, which were earlier in 28% slab and they were bought down to 18% slab. Similarly, there were other goods which were again bought from 28 to 18 or 18 to 12%. Now this reduction in rate of tax actually reduce the burden of tax on the buyer as far as payout is concerned. What also it means is the prices of the device and the reduction in tax rate shall not be pocketed by the supplier. It needs to be shared with the supplier, with the eventual buyer, and the same ratio shall be passed on. When we talk about benefit of input tax, the only thing contemplated under section 171 was to contemplate the earlier block credit, which are now available as a credit, the benefit of those block credit should be passed on to the end consumer and should not be pocketed by the supplier himself. I have taken 2 case studies to illustrate this entire scheme, and I wanted to emphasize on critical points, which are actually the struggling areas which are awaiting the clarity from the high courts. And eventually, I am sure that once the high court rules in any which favor, the other party is going to go to apex court to get a clarity with respect to anti-profiteering. Getting on with the first sector, I think this anti-profiteering has hit the 2 major sectors of the economy, one being real estate, the other being FMCG. These are the 2 case studies that I picked up so that we can broadly debate on this. If you see at the screen, the first and foremost submission I had was this anti-profiteering never gave a methodology by which a benefit could have been computed as to what is the quantum that should be passed. Neither there was guidelines, neither there was rule framed as to how you should compute, neither there was any clarification issued on this account as to how this benefit has to be computed. In the absence of these mechanism or guiding pillars, the SSC or the supplier were held or were actually clueless about the manner in which they should compute this benefit which is to be passed on. For the want of better benefit, everybody look at the appropriate method which they in their mind thought was the best and the closest to passing on the benefit. The major concern that was there in the mind of the supplier while computing was that they should pass on the entire tax burden which was available or which got unblocked in the GST regime to the buyer. And with respect to increase in input tax, the emphasis was the extra credit which was being available to the buyer on account of GST infliction was again to be passed back to the buyers. So in the absence of the method to be computed, they resorted to the best possible, which were again challenged by authority. Just to illustrate in the front of you, the slide deals with the method that has been followed by the real estate. In the inquiries done by DGAP, followed by NAPA, they have followed the approach of computing the credit vis-a-vis the turnover. While the pre-GST turnover was compared with the credit and the ratio was arrived. As you can see, it is 3.75. Again, in GST, the turnover was compared with the credit available and they came as a percentage. The difference in these two was considered to be a profiteering benefit going in the real estate sector. Why, according to me, this is not correct is for following reason. One, the turnover and credit are two unlinked because turnover depends upon demand schedule, which you have from buyers to pay the taxes, whereas your credit relates to cost of construction. Therefore, you can't have a turnover versus a tax rate approach because they are mismatched in terms of timing differences. Therefore, the benefit that is arrived is incorrect. The second major point was, by this method, the credit of services, which was always available to the supplier, was again factored. In the service tax regime, if you go back, the applicable rate of services were approximately 14.5%, which got up to major amount of services to 18%. By this method, even when you compare the credit of services, which was earlier available, the credit was increased by the 4%, which was a tax rate difference in the service tax vis-a-vis GST on the services component. For various reasons, this benefit or this method which has been adopted by DGAP and blessed by NAPA, which is pending before the high courts now, is not leading to an appropriate result because according to us, the right approach could have been to go to the cost and see what are the credit which are getting unblocked in GST. Perhaps that could have been a better method of dealing with this as compared to what has been adopted as a turnover method. Getting on to the second sector, FMCG, you may see very clearly that the method adopted by the SSC in this case was passing on a percentage of a benefit which is based on the tax incidence. So SSC was taking the applicable taxes at an average rate in the pre-GST regime, then comparing with the price, same he was doing in the GST regime. So he was computing the tax incidence based on percentage of price and passing on the benefit of the anti-profiteering to the buyer. If you may clearly see the screen, you may be able to find out that the MRP under the GST was higher. So was the discount which is given in the B column, which was much higher. The authority was actually not accepting these kind of consideration because they have debated various items in this manner by which they have come up on the major observation. The major observation, when you collate the FMCG sector as well as the real estate sector, are as follows. According to me, there are critical 5 or 6 points. I'm trying to address each of them independently. According to me, the first point was the key observation made by the National Anti-Profiting Authority, which is NAA, was to say that the benefit has to be computed at each SKU level. When you say SKU level, it means at each individual product which is offered by the company needs to be computed at that level. You can't club the benefit for the purpose of passing on the anti-profiteering benefit. For example, let us take and understand this by way of simple. So say Maggi is being offered in a single combo and there is a packet of Maggi which is at the 2 level. So two Maggis in a single pack and a single Maggi in a single pack. What eventually has been meant is you need to compute the price of each of these SKU and then pass on the price to the end buyer in the same proportion. Now this may actually lead to little kind of absurdity in matters wherein the say Maggi was offered for 10 rupees and the profiteering benefit comes to say 20 paisa, which is not actually a legal tender, which is valid in terms of the RBI notification. How do you pass on the benefit of that 20 paisa? So these theoretical observations were actually given, observed, but effectively if you see, the compliance thereof was actually literally impossible. In certain cases, even the authorities have gone beyond this and observed that if you are giving extra quantity in GST to pass on this benefit of anti-profiteering, say for example, Maggi was offered at 100 grams for 10 rupees, post GST, they could not have passed 20 paisa because it was a problem, a business decision as well as legally somewhere restrained decision which they were supposed to take. They increased the quantity from 100 grams to 105 grams per se. Probably this extra they have passed on as a by way of increased material, they have not considered to be a valid benefit passed on by the buyer. So these are the major observations, firstly, at the FMCG level, which are creating a problem. Second point, which I feel is the most important point, which is there in the Whirlpool decision that we have seen a while back, was the cost of raw materials, inputs that are independent of the computation of your price or the benefit that you have passed on. So they are considering that the cost of production with respect to manufacturing of a particular product will remain same in pre and post GST. Each one of you which are today listening to me will be very clear of the fact that the price under two tax regime can never be same. Price is a dynamic price which keeps on changing based on various decisions such as demand, supply, your market position, your season, and so on and so forth factor. Probably the cost also undergoes a change as far as the time is concerned. Whereas the observation made by the National Anti-Profiting Authority on this account is we would discount the change in prices. We would consider the prices as a constant in order to compute the benefit, which according to me is far away from reality. According to me, there is a major gap. Somewhere you are putting restrictions on the SSE in order to carry on his business freely, which is guaranteed by Article 19(1)(g) of the Indian Constitution. Moving further to another point, wherein I feel what they have observed is the benefit of anti-profiteering cannot be passed on by way of discount. Probably in major decision that we have seen, what they have observed is you need to mention very clearly that this is anti-profiteering discount or this is benefit on account of anti-profiteering under 171. To my mind, this is something you are having a post-facto discussions on. At the time when the GST was introduced, there was no guideline as to what the discount should be nomenclature. An SAC who has validly computed the benefit and given the name of discount to pass on that benefit, you can't come back and say this is a business discount and I will not allow you as anti-profiteering. Perhaps the nomenclature of word discount has been misconstrued by all these decisions wherein they have said that business discount is used as a guise to pass on the anti-profiteering benefit, which I feel is not correct way of looking at it. You need to consider the normal discount policy and see if there is any additional discount. That additional discount has to be by way of some reason. And wherever the SSC has demonstrated that that extra discount which is being passed on is actually an anti-profiting discount. That proof should have been submitted by the authority. Moving on to the fourth major point, according to me, is while they are appreciating the fact that you are free to carry on the business in India and free to determine your market price, but we will still consider the anti-profiteering benefit based on the base price only. Even if you have revised the product under business compulsion, for the purpose of computing the benefit, we will still take the same price, and this will override your power of revision of price, which is a business decision. This, according to me, constitutes directly constitution right, which is given under 19(1)(g) in respect of freedom to carry on trade and business. Another point, according to me, which is thought-provoking, is they have observed that Section 171 is not transitionary in nature and rather permanent in nature. Enforceability of Section 161 is perpetually till the time it is repealed. What they are trying to mean is we will not consider as any time limit to this section. Wherever there is any change in rate, wherever there is a change in a tax structure or input structure, anti-profiteering will immediately kick in at that point of time, and we will have to reconsider the benefit and the pricing calibration. One example could be similarly in real estate. The entire scheme of taxability got changed on 1/4/2019, wherein the new rates were revised with certain conditions. Each of these events, which is giving rise to rate change, are considered to be one of the major things that are having an anti-profiteering threat. Similarly, getting on to the other part of it that I want to cover and close, this section is subject to challenge, perhaps before the authorities, and the major challenges are: what is the validity? There is a structure problem in terms of the formulation of the National Anti-Profiteering Authority, the constitution thereof. They are acting as a price regulator and price controller, and they are not acting as a watchdog. They are taking ad hoc instructions, investigation period. They are ignoring the increase in absolute cost, which according to me is absolutely baseless as far as passing on the benefit. They are raising questions on the manner in which you are passing on discount. Then there are ordering that on the anti-profiteering amount, you again have to refund the GST also, which is collected from the customer. This again leads to double whammy to the all customer, that at the first place, they have paid the tax, and the supplier who are considered to be profited are supposed to refund the tax amount also to the buyer. This, according to me, is having multiple problems. This has to be taken up at the higher forum, and I am sure that the High Court will definitely do something with respect to how this ad hoc mechanism has to be stopped. Moving on to the second major topic that is given to me is composite or a mixed supply. When you talk about composite and a mixed supply, this is a similar concept which were earlier there in GST regime called bundled and other than naturally bundled. This is the same 66F which was there earlier. It was there in section 65A of the earlier regime, which was prevalent prior to 1/7/2012. So this has always been a case that a supply which is comprising of two or more supply, one of which is a major supply and the other is only adding value to the main supply or adding means to the main supply or enjoyment of main supply, this shall be treated as a principal supply. So I am taking ticket to fly to Bombay tomorrow. In the course to Bombay, my flight will also be served with meals. These meals are nothing but these meals are ancillary to the transportation of passenger by air services. It is a perfect case of a composite supply wherein meals are actually ancillary to the main supply, which is transportation. I am taking the services of transportation, which is a principal supply, and the ancillary supply is a meal which is served on board. When we talk about mixed supply, when two or more supplies are actually aggregated without having their commonality, then those supplies are commonly referred to as a mixed supply. I'll give you an example. We may go and do a packing for a gift hamper. We may pick up a chocolate, a box of a juice, so on and so forth. Now this is a mixed supply that we are going as per our own example and getting the box done. The box has a single price. Now that box consists of major products which are at different tax rates. The law is very clear on that point. It comes back and say the same thing, that we will not get into each of the product. Since you are charging a single price for an entire bucket and that bucket has major goods, we will pick up the good which is having the highest taxability on the particular bundle, and then the entire bundle will be taxed at the higher rate. This is what is concept of mixed supply. I have an example, which is a live example, which I thought I will raise if time permits. So just to give you a context, this is the common marketing scheme. You may hear these schemes which are applicable in various places. Oftenly, you will find real estate developer promoting the sale of flat by way of offering some kind of freebies. These freebies range from an air conditioner, home furnishing, or a car, or so on and so forth. According to me, the principal supply here is sale of flat. You are artificially bundling something which is a freebie. Now, in the law, there is nothing which is freebie. Freebie has always a price embedded in the principal supply. So when you are buying a flat of 2 crore, by which you are given a car, say of 20 lakh rupees, this 20 lakh is not actually free. The cost is embedded in the price that you pay for your product, which is the flat in this case. The question is, what will be the applicable rate? Now go back to the definition of the main supply that we were discussing, whether it will be mixed supply or not. Yes, they are not naturally bundled, they are combined together. In this case, since it is charging a single product, say 2 crore for a flat, that is a single price which is charged for both flat as well as car. Car attracts 28% plus the other cess, whereas the GST on the flat is 12 or 5% as the case may be. What the law will tomorrow come back and say that I will tax the entire flat at 28% plus compensation cess and not at 5% or 12% applicable to the flat rate. Therefore, the problem of composite and mixed supply needs to be looked whenever you are bundling two supplies. Just be sure on this point. Otherwise, you may have to bear a drastic consequence with respect to this. I have done 2 case studies. I will briefly conclude these 2 case studies. The first one relating to sale of developed plot. You are finding a lot of controversy with respect to what is a tax rate applicable on sale of plots. When we talk of sale of plot, generally you are not going and buying an agricultural land. What you look at is a sale of a developed plot. When you say developed plot, why it is developed? The difference between agricultural land and a developed land is it undergoes a transformation wherein the amenities are added to an agricultural land. The process goes like this. The land is first converted from agriculture to the plotted land. On the plotted land, you bring up the various amenities such as common road, sewage, transportation, pipeline. Then you bring up telephone line, you bring up clubs, you bring up common infrastructure for the particular plot of land. When you add all these things as an amenity, it becomes plot. When you go and sell the plot, it is not a case that you are selling plots independent of these facilities, or buyer is not looking at these facilities independent of sale of land. Therefore, these are actually naturally bundled when you go and buy the price of plot. Though there may be a separate charges which you are charging for amenities, but essentially amenities has no standalone existence of their own. I would give you a different example to understand this. Even if you are sold 20% of your flat available in the entire township, yet you have to develop 100% of the common facilities. Therefore, we mean to say that amenities are integral part of the plot of land. They are not dependent upon whether you are selling a land after completion, post completion. They are integrally connected. They are part and parcel of basic sale price that you are developing. According to me, the approach taken by all the advanced ruling on this point is absolutely contrary to the understanding that is there prevalent in the industry and in the books also. Fortunately or unfortunately, you may also refer to the decision that they are citing in support of this. In one of the advanced ruling I was going through in the case of Gujarat, they are citing the case of Narne Construction, which is a law on the consumer forum. When a consumer forum is being interpreted, the interpretation given to consumer is much wider. The interpretation given to the term service is much wider. They are borrowing the decision of a consumer forum wherein service has been widely defined to give meaning to the common facilities as a part of services. According to me, in case of sale of plot of land, there is no construction done. There is no separate provision of common facilities. They are integrally connected. To me, these advanced ruling are not laying down the correct law, and they are not appreciating the provision and has to be taken up. I'm amazed to see that not many of these people have gone to High Court to challenge it and see how they come along. Moving on to the second example that is given to me is with respect to supply of electricity. I will just not refer to the slide and make it very simple to understand. We may refer to the supply of electricity which are given to us at a home level. When we go on to the authority to apply for electricity connection, they will charge us for certain thing as a fixed fee. These fixed fees are connection charges, meter charges, then they will lay down the wiring charges. So they collect certain charges to give a new connection. And then at every month, you will be charged variable amount based on your consumption. Plus, there are certain specific services which you may ask on a need basis. Suppose you are doubtful that my meter is running fast, I want to get my meter tested. So there is a facility called meter testing charges which you may opt. If you refer to the provisions of Electricity Act, they are governed. The entire Electricity Act governs the manner in which this charges has to be charged. Section 45 of the Electricity Act is absolutely clear and gives power to the State Electricity Regulating Commission. In Delhi, it is DERC, Delhi Electricity Regulation Commission. They are the premier body which is supposed to conduct the charges, which are supposed to lay down the charges, which are supposed to be charged from buyer. Now, I'll take an example and then we got on to the amount which is paid by me as initial connection charges for meter, for wiring. Are they composite supply or are they different supplies or are they independent supplies? This is the primarily question. According to me, the act of taking meter or act of applying for a meter or act of applying for a commission is your first step towards getting the electricity. You are getting this or you are paying this integrally to get the electricity. This does not have a standalone existence of it. Why would you go on to apply for a electricity meter if you don't intend to consume the electricity? To me, the fact that these charges are fixed charges does not make much of a difference. The charges can always be fixed plus variable. Consideration can always be fixed plus variable. What you need to understand is whether these charges has a standalone existence or not from a customer perspective. According to me, I still find the same answer. According to me, these charges which are charged as a fixed charges towards say meter replacement, meter connection, special deposits, or their deposit work which are undertaken by these electricity distribution companies, all these things are nothing but they are integral part of supply of electricity and they have to be read along with electricity. You cannot charge tax on this quantum. You cannot consider them to be independent service given to buyer. This is my view. This my view is also endorsed by Gujarat High Court in the case of Torrent Power. Exactly on same line they have held on each of this principle that I've explained you, that they don't have an independent existence. They have considered the part from a perspective of how buyers looks at it, how industry looks at it, what is the industrial framework, what is the legal framework. By considering each of these arguments, High Court has categorically run down the circulars and the instruction issued by Service Tax or by the GST authority, which is proposing to levy GST on this independent supply item. They have held that these are integral part of supply of electricity, therefore you cannot charge tax on this. But this controversy is looming large because there are multiple advanced rulings which are against this point. Despite of Torrent Pharma, which is a High Court holding this, still they are being charged. The only difference here is Torrent Pharma is pending before Supreme Court. They have only issued notice. They have not stayed the proceeding. Why the authorities are not taking the decision passed by Delhi High Court in consideration while passing this AAR, I am not sure. Unless the decision is stayed by the Apex Court of India, it still holds goods. The decision and the ratio of High Court still hold goods. The AAR are much lower authority in the pedestal or in the food chain of litigation strategy. They cannot override this according to me, but yet you are finding this. What I suggest to all my listeners is wherever you have opportunity to understand these things, kindly instigate client to go on to a next level wherein you have scope of making the law which is a fair to public, because eventually the money will go out from your pocket. Moving on to the last aspect, which is the return part of it. When you talk about return, the first thing that comes to my mind is with respect to what has happened to Delhi High Court in the case of Airtel, right? The Delhi High Court in the case of Airtel has held categorically that the 3B is a return which can be amended. Now, after this decision, unfortunately, if you see two sides, first, the utility for revising the 3B return is not enabled on the platform. What you see on a platform is only amendment for the new returns. For the 3B, there is no per se utility available on the portal to make an amendment. How this will be affected, it has been a decision has been ended almost 3 months now, but no step has been taken in order to provide this facility. Second thing that comes to my mind is with respect to how should you be able to treat these taxes of which have been paid by the SSC. Say in the Airtel case, July and October, July, August, and September taxes which are excess paid by Bharti Airtel for a period when they had the input tax credit, how they will be applied as a refund under Section 54. Will government consider timeline of 2 years, or will they consider that this refund arises out of the order passed by the court? Therefore, the 2 years will apply from state. So for refund also, you see a challenge in authority going back and giving you refund. One major thing which I was wondering with respect to this decision is in the context of the claim which is made by department on account of mismatch. So they are asking you to reconcile your 2A return with your input register. Wherever they are matching, wherever the 3B is not matching with 2A, what they are saying, we will not deny you credit as these taxes has not been paid. According to me, these kind of cases run down to the scheme and they help you to defend the position stating that 3B is not actually the return, 2A is not the mechanism which was prescribed in initial law. As and when this law was introduced, the scheme was having GSTR 1, 2 and 3. The 2 and 3 was never introduced. Therefore, this mechanism of matching 2A with 3B is something which is created by department on their own, and it cannot hold ground as and when contested before the department. Definitely, this ratio of Airtel will help you to defend those claims wherein department is reversing the credit or proposing to reverse the credit based on the mismatch on the account of this. Another important thing I thought I will touch upon was with respect to section 16.2. If you refer to this condition for availing the credit at the hands of recipient, you will find one condition wherein they're saying if the tax has actually been paid to the government, only upon fulfillment of this condition we would allow you the credit. To me, if you read 16.2, all the conditions which are there are from the perspective of recipient of services. These services are not from the recipient or providers end. This is the only condition which is available from the providers end to see that the taxes has been paid. If you read down the law, as you may be aware, there is no mechanism which is available with the recipient of services to ensure that the taxes thereof has been paid by the recipient. Only thing that you can check is whether the taxes which have been paid are reported in 2A or not. You may be very well aware that 2A gets auto-populated from GSTR 1. GSTR 1 is not authenticated proof of whether the payment of tax has been made, because tax payment can only be made in 3B and not in 1A. In the absence of any mechanism at the end of the recipient to ensure that the taxes are paid, keeping in mind, according to me, this condition is far-fetched. And you may also like to refer to the decision which has been recently passed by the Honorable Madras High Court and the other High Courts on the similar point, wherein the similar condition was read down in the context of the earlier VAT regime, wherein this condition was, similar condition was there. Perhaps you have a very well lead which you can take from those decisions, which you can definitely use. I will touch only one more topic and then I will conclude because I understand there is a paucity of time. Another interesting thing that
Kapilji would request you to conclude in the next few minutes because
I'll conclude in last topic, 2 minutes, only 2 minutes.
Okay.
I'm only touching on a very interesting aspect.
Sure.
Many of us are aware about the MSME Act and the condition disposed by the MSME Act, wherein the payment to the MSME supplier has been mandated to be made within the period of 45 days. Now, I'm just evaluating the similar kind of condition wherein you are supposed to pay taxes along with the base price to the MSME Act within 45 days, but you don't have a wherewithal to ensure that the MSME supplier has paid tax to the government. The problem is even more worse in the case wherein the supplier pays tax on a quarterly basis. Because if you have to read down this condition under 16.2, then you have to give it a natural meaning. The only point I'm trying to emphasize is the condition of tax paid has to be seen qua the provider. It cannot be, my bad, it has to be seen by the qua the recipient. Had recipient paid the taxes to the provider and for some reason provider is not able to file return or pay tax, you can't go back and penalize the recipient who has honestly and honestly paid tax to the provider who has failed to pay. These kinds of conditions are retrograde. They are actually putting the people under a scanner for no act and no fault of their own. With this, I would like to have a conclusion from my topic. I will be happy to take on the question which are there in the answer. I again sincerely thank all the organizers for putting across a wonderful show and having so many people. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Kapilji. It was a wonderful deliberation, and I think many of the doubts of the people were cleared